A musician,
a long-distance kayaker,
a businessman,
she looks after animals,
artist,
author.
We interview remarkable people.
They're talented in so many different areas.
You're listening to The Dialogue.
89.7 FM Eastside Radio.
You're listening to 89.7 FM Eastside Radio. This is Natasha Moy and The Dialogue, where we interview remarkable people. Men and women who have done extraordinary things with their lives. We follow their lives from the beginning through to where they currently are. And today I have Lucy Perry on the show with me. Now, Lucy is one of those wonderful people who is completely embraces diversity. She isn't just one thing. She currently is a phenomenal speaker, a communicator, and the new CEO of Sunrise Cambodia. She has had a stellar career across a whole lot of different fantastic organizations and businesses. And Lucy, I just want to say welcome, and I'm glad to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You and your pink hair.
It's perfect for radio.
It is perfect for radio. It's so good. At least we always know where you are and what you're up to. Now, I have a wonderful 30-minute show with you, so I'm going to get to kind of drill down a little bit. Now, you've recently become the CEO of Sunrise Cambodia, and that has led from a whole lot of other things. I just want to go back to the beginning. When you were born.
Sure. I slipped out like a wet fish, apparently.
Did you?
If you ask my mum.
I think every woman dreams about that, rather than, pushing the watermelon off. And 4 kids? Where do you come?
I'm the youngest of 4.
Oh, are you the baby?
I'm the baby. That's why I slipped out like a wet fish.
That's obviously why you landed up with the most emphasis placed on you, because you were last.
I think so, yes. I got away with the most.
Mum and Dad, how did they kind of shape how you've turned out?
Nice question. My mum is an absolute optimist. I don't know anyone else as optimistic as my mum. She just sees the bright side of every single situation. And I think a lot of that has worn off on me, although I don't think I'm quite as optimistic as my mum. But I always turn to my mum when I need to see the bright side.
Oh, really?
And that's been since I was a kid. My dad is a serial entrepreneur, so he has always worked for himself, or nearly always. He's an engineer, and I think growing up, I just always saw my dad create his own things, his own businesses and his own income. And so that never frightened me. I never felt like I was taking the leap, as people say. Being an entrepreneur just sort of seemed normal to me from witnessing my dad as an engineer. So I guess my parents gave me that optimism and entrepreneurialism and, tons of love and lots of support. They never ever told me I couldn't, or I wouldn't be able to, or I didn't have the talent to do something. They always just cheered me on. So wonderful, fab parents.
So entrepreneurial spirit is inside you, and then you go off and you become a jillaroo, which of course was sadly something I didn't know about. Clearly I've never jillarooed out there on the outback.
Well, there's a slight gap between birth and being a jillaroo.
You went to school. You went to private girls' school, didn't you?
I did, yeah. I was the only one of the 4 kids who had that massive investment placed on my shoulders.
Did you do well at school?
Yeah, I did. I was. I got the competition of school early on. So in year 7, I looked around and I thought, I don't want any of these people to beat me. And so I worked really, really hard. I mucked around like crazy, but I worked really hard. And I wound up getting, it was 97 out of 100 for my HSE. So I did well enough at school that I could get into whatever I wanted to after that.
But that's your personality. I mean, you've kind of, even when you worked for, the Helm and Fistula organisation, the whole idea when you were raising money there was to beat everybody. I mean, it was to do the best that you could possibly be. I mean, it was to make as much money as you're not a coaster.
Yeah, and I constantly compared us to world-class charities and thought we have to do better than them. We have to do, for example, our social media has to be more engaging than World Vision, which was actually a cakewalk. But that's what I constantly did that. We were a small niche charity, but we had to be better than the big guys, aim higher and be better, more engaging, earn more on less. So yes, I'm a bit competitive like that. Which
is probably very good for all the charity organisations that you have sort of migrated towards. You were raised in Africa. Well, you were born in Africa.
Born in Africa. We left there when I was 5. We went to England, only stayed there 3 years because it was too cold.
That's bloody terrible. That's freezing.
And we moved here after that. So I was 8 when we arrived in Australia, and we rented a place at Paradise Beach on Pittwater.
Yep.
And honestly, we thought we had died and gone to heaven. We truly did think we lived in paradise, apart from the fact that I got to wag 6 months of school. In that process of moving countries, it was just heaven on a stick, that place. We loved it.
Now, you kind of left the private girls' school doing really well, went to university, and then just decided not for you.
Yeah, I worked as a jewellery first. It was really good to do some
What did you do as the jewellery? I'm just still curious about what the jewellery thing is.
It depends on the property you work on.
Did you pick fruit, or were you did you herd the cows? Or?
Yeah, I cut cattle, I built fences, rode horses all day. It was a farm that bred racehorses and did some cattle and a lot of hay. So I drove tractors and built fences. And
I see you on social media a lot on the back of a horse still.
I do
love the
to
horse
ride.
thing, don't you?
My time off, I go and find somewhere exotic to go for a gallop. So my last one was in Mozambique.
I saw that. I've seen quite a lot of you because I follow you on Facebook and I watch what you do because I find it all quite fascinating. So we've been the jewellery, we've done the hair and all the rest of it, and we've been to university. So we've already had a fairly, interesting go at everything. Uni, not for you? Why?
I flunked out of uni because I had worked so hard at school, and then I went to university. I started a communication degree, and it was just too theoretical and too vague for me. And I just wanted to get stuck into the workforce. So I flunked out of uni quite quickly and was really lucky to pick up a fabulous job in an ad agency. And it was a cause agency, so all their clients were charities like World Vision, Amnesty International, Salvation Army, World Society for the Protection of Animals. Those were the clients I worked on. So in my early career, I could see I really enjoyed working on causes, and I learnt some of the science behind fundraising communication really early on.
I think that it's quite interesting. So you've got this entrepreneurial dad that's kind of influenced you. You've been to this private girls' school, so you've been around a lot of privilege, which is what does happen in those private schools. Been to university and kind of seen the linear education that you get, and then landed up in an ad agency, which, let's be honest, is all about having to look outside the box to
think
create
differently.
Exactly.
Be creative.
So that probably, formed quite a large percentage of your interest along the way.
Yeah,
those
it
things,
did.
Ticking all those boxes.
And I only had that job for about 9 months, but it had a profound impact on my whole career. And I only had that job for a short time because I had a massive motorcycle accident.
I can see you on a motorcycle, the pink hair. I mean, you would have had what kind of motorbike did you get?
Well, I was only on the P's, so it was a 250cc
Was
Suzuki.
it pink?
No, it was black and shiny.
Was it black and shiny?
I've only had pink hair for the last year.
I know you've only had pink hair for the last year. I've seen some
And
photographs.
now I'm 41, so
I
it's
love
been
the
a while.
pink hair. I wish I was brave enough to do pink hair. I think I should do a different colour. So we had the motorbike accident. What did you do? How did you...
It was on the lead up to the Sydney Harbour Bridge, and a dude just needed to be 6 lanes over in the other direction, and he just took me out and broke my right tib and fib spectacularly. I was really lucky not to be killed on that night, to be run over by other cars as I slid across the freeway on my stomach backwards with my bike sliding with me and sparks flying. I can close my eyes and picture all that.
Oh my goodness.
But broke my leg really, really badly. Broke a bunch of bones in my hands and that sort of stuff, but that was really temporary. But then infection set in after that, and that's why my injuries were so serious. So it was 14 reconstructive operations, bone grafts, tissue grafts, skin grafts, artery grafts, the works. In the end, the only thing that saved my leg was surgery they've been doing since World War II called cross-leg surgery. So they actually took the calf off my left leg. They kept it attached to my left leg and they grafted it to the shin on my right leg, and they left it that way. So they stitched my legs together, which is highly ironic for a promiscuous 19-year-old. How rude that they should do that to me. It was so frustrating. But it was only for a month. I was a mermaid for a month.
Okay.
And then they separated them surgically, and my right leg stayed nice and pink and I got to keep it. So it was full on time.
You're a very lucky
horrible.
girl.
Mm.
Very, very lucky. So you kind of got through all of this. I mean, it's normally when people come on the show, it's because they've had a fairly interesting life. And so we've got to the motorbike accident. How old are we? 19?
Yeah, I was 19.
Oh my goodness. We've done a lot up until the age of 19. And then into your own business.
I did. I realised I wouldn't be able to go back to an agency full-time job with a leg that was a bit of a full-time job on its own. It took 7 years to get to a point where my leg was as recovered as it was ever going to be.
Do you struggle with it now?
It's chronic pain, but I'm very good at handling that. I'm really good at putting it aside. It's only when someone says, "Does your leg hurt?" where I have to think about it and go, actually, yes, it does. But I'm really good at putting it aside. And it's now been 20-something years, so I'm very good at that.
Okay.
So it doesn't, it affects some things, but, I can ride a bike and I can ride a horse and I can play a really shabby game of tennis. So, it hasn't affected me that badly.
Okay, so it's about the attitude you have towards it, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess so.
If
you look on the bright side, as my mum always does, I have never lost a scar competition ever.
Fantastic.
So it was in that year.
The winner even comes out with something like that. My goodness. I like to win, even when it comes to scars.
But it was during that year I realised I wouldn't go back to my agency job. I needed to start my own thing. And so I began my little creative services firm. And it began just as me as a freelancer, really. And I picked up a few little clients, but it grew quickly. I knew what I was doing. I learned fast and I pulled together a little team. And at its peak, it had a nice, tidy $1 million turnover. So it was a really nice little business. I ran that for 20 years, picked up some really juicy clients, worked across... actually, interestingly, not a lot of charity work. I worked for the NRL, some big brands like Boral and CSR, and built my skill set. So by the end of that 20 years, when I was thoroughly bored with doing it, by then, I had a really, really good solid skill set as a communicator.
Okay. You're listening to 89.7 FM Eastside Radio. This is Natasha and The Dialogue. I'm interviewing Lucy Perry, CEO of Sunrise Cambodia, speaker, communicator, and just all-round fabulous person. So, Lucy, we've touched on a whole lot of, stuff up until you started your own business, and you've got kids.
I do. I'm a breeder.
You are a breeder. You got a couple.
3 darlings.
Yeah,
3
3.
Of them, yeah.
And you started when you in your early 20s.
Well, no, I was married when I was 21, but I was auditioning him for father for at least 8 years before we had children.
All right, okay. obviously he auditioned all right.
He did.
And
we just took a while to get around to having kids. We wanted to succeed in our work areas before we had kids. Yeah.
And so how old are your kids?
They're 12, 9, and 7.
And any of them follow in your footsteps? Can you see yourself in any of them?
Oh, I see a bit of me in all 3 of them. I think it's my middle child, though. She's the child I deserve.
Oh, really?
She's the most like me. She's the biggest firecracker. She's the biggest handful, the most raging temper, but the most passionate, she'll be the one who winds up saving the world.
Which is what we want. I mean, we want people who are going to save the world. Now, obviously, you got to a point in your own business where you just went, don't want to do this anymore,
just didn't float my boat anymore. It was just a bit of a drag. I'd look back over a year's worth of client projects and it just would make me shudder. I'd go, imagine doing that project again. That was such a bore. It just wasn't, I wasn't being pushed. And the actual clients, the work I was working on, one of the last projects we did was a catalogue of hinges.
Okay, that's enough to put anybody's, soul into a backward flip.
So I found myself distracted and looking for other things to sort of entertain my brain and new things to try. And one of the things I did just on the side was I trained as a doula or a childbirth support partner. So I was going along to births and supporting couples and really enjoyed that. It was between my first and my second child that I did that training and really enjoyed that. Babies tend to be born at 4 a.m, so I'd get called out at all hours of the night and then I'd wind up back at my desk the next day or the day after that if it was a long birth, and I love doing that, but as a result of that, I worked out men were being left out of the conversation. And as a communicator, I'd loved finding a little niche that needed to be communicated with well. And so I developed the world's first childbirth education program specifically for men. And it's run in pubs all over Australia. So I franchised the model. I ran it for 6 years myself and really perfected it. And that helped me perfect my presentation style and my speaking skills. And then I franchised it nationally and I had 19 presenters all over over Australia. So I learned all about how to take a program and have other people deliver it, an operations manual for all that kind of stuff, a national marketing plan, and I really enjoyed doing that. And then I wrote a book, Cheers to Childbirth, which went with the program, and it still sells through that network of workshops and in bookshops nationally. That book keeps selling because people keep breeding. So
it's never going out of fashion.
Never going out of fashion, and men are still clueless about their role in childbirth because they're expected to be there, but no one tells them what to do and what not to do.
Absolutely, I think it's a brilliant idea.
That worked nicely, and then I sold that business when I accepted the role of CEO of a brand new women's health charity in Australia. So that really absorbed all my time, and I stepped away from the creative business into a new passion, and I could really, really throw myself at that role.
Well, that was kind of linked to the whole doula thing and the baby thing, wasn't it? I mean, because you were with helm and fistula Ethiopia. So let's talk a little bit about that experience for you and what they did, because you were massively instrumental in that business and had a huge passion for it.
I did.
Why?
I guess it was my doula days had me with a massive soft spot for women giving birth with good support. And when I saw Catherine Hamlin on the Oprah show and she told the story of the patients who have catastrophic childbirth injuries, it just really touched my heart. I'd only just had a baby myself, so I was hormonally disadvantaged at the time, and the story had me by the ovaries, and I knew I wanted to help an organisation like that. So I just started donating initially. Then I started volunteering my skills as a communicator, photographer, and I was quickly travelling to Ethiopia. Once a year I'd go and do a big photo shoot, and that's how I got to know the work really well and know Catherine personally. So when it came time for her, she realised she was not getting any younger. She was about 87 when she realised she needed to fund her legacy on a business model rather than a begging model, which is how it had been raised. The funds had been raised in the past. And so she appointed me as the first CEO in Australia to do that and create that whole new entity on a business model. And it went gangbusters.
You raised a fortune.
About $7 million in 2.5 years.
Which is an incredible amount of money. In fact, I met you. I met you at the International Women's Day event, and you were talking at that event. And actually, interesting enough, Jean Kitson was also speaking at that event.
Yeah, she's hilarious.
And I've had Jean Kitson on the show as well from that lunch.
Oh, great.
So I've had both of you. That lunch delivered two fantastic people. So that obviously sadly has come to an end, and it's time to move on to something a little bit more challenging, perhaps, seeing as you did such an awesome job there. Just a little bit around helm and fistula. You told some beautiful stories when you spoke about women who had such traumatic experiences. Can you give me one of those experiences?
Sure. There was just one I was telling yesterday about a patient who, and this is a little unusual for Ethiopia, but she was orphaned and her aunt and uncle trafficked her, so they sold her into slavery.
Oh, God.
And there's not an enormous amount of that going on inside of Ethiopia. It's more people being trafficked out of the country. But she was sold into slavery to another family and just had to work like a dog. And she was raped and beaten and became pregnant when she was there. And she ran away from them back to the only family she had, which was her aunt and uncle. And so they kept her, and she just had to work for them. Until the day she gave birth, and she went into labour and she got stuck in obstructed labour all by herself, long way from any kind of hospital, any kind of help, no midwife by her side or anything like that. And she went into this long, terrible labour that caused horrific internal injuries. Her baby got stuck and made terrible injuries to her bladder and her bowel. So eventually the baby was born, but stillborn, and only 7% of these babies are born alive. So she lost her baby and then discovered she was completely incontinent. And to be bowel incontinent as well as bladder incontinent is just hideous. And she only owned one dress, and she lived in a little hut, and she stank. She lived there for a few months. Her aunt and uncle would just feed her once a day. She'd become this horrid liability to the village. And eventually it was the hyenas who saved her. They're the only predator in Ethiopia, and she smelt so bad they used to circle her hut at night, and it really frightened her. So she woke up one morning and she just fled. She ran until she made it to a mission station. And these missionaries could smell her coming, knew exactly what was wrong with her, and took her to the Fistula Hospital. So she was there for a while. She had a few operations. They cured her completely. And when it was time to discharge her, she said, I have nowhere to go. I have no family. And so they gave her a job, and she's one of the nurses' aides, and she's still there at the hospital.
It's pretty cool,
today,
isn't it? It's an amazing story.
Yeah, total renewal. And she's such an empathetic nurse's aide. To have someone who's been through the worst of the worst and knows what these patients have been through is a really wonderful thing.
Now, you've recently been made CEO of Sunrise Cambodia. What is that? What does that organisation do?
They began, well, it's funding the legacy of an Aussie legend, a humanitarian legend. Her name is Geraldine Cox. And the organisation began as a big orphanage in Phnom Penh in Cambodia in the early 90s. It's now grown well beyond residential care, and residential care is being reduced down to an absolute minimum because kids are better with their family. It's better to support the whole village and the family than to have kids in an orphanage. But the residential care will always be there for the severely disabled and for the true orphans who have no family. Foster care is not an ideal model in a country like Cambodia where people will just do it for the money.
Absolutely.
So it's supporting villages. There's lots of fabulous sustainable development, social enterprise, putting in wells and water pumps in villages, replacing their housing. Some of the houses you just couldn't believe what a large family of 7 or 8 will live in, a tiny little timber hut, no sanitation, no running water. For $2,500 we can put in a new house that's got its washing facilities and a nice big water pot outside and a water pump. So
it's got infrastructure.
A little bit, and it's nice sustainable stuff, so people look after it themselves. So not a lot of investment goes into an enormous change in a family's lives. Education as well is incredibly important, and health centres, because we've discovered that it's really hard to educate someone when they're dead. So it's better if you pop some health services in first.
Sorry. You delivered that very, very calmly.
Well, people bang on about education like it's the be-all and end-all, and actually you've got to have people healthy and fit in order to educate them. So the health has to come first and then education after that, and leadership and all those things come down the track. But you've got to have healthy humans to educate them and then give them the opportunities.
So your role is going to be, as CEO, is going to be based in Australia?
I'll be based in Australia, but it'll be all over Australia. I'll be the public speaker that really presents that work here in Australia. Geraldine will come to Australia for the really big guns and for the big media pieces, and it'll be developing a really fabulous communication strategy to raise sustainable funds for the organisation. We need $5 million a year to fund the work we have to do.
That.
Well, they're raising under $2 million at the moment, so I've got a growth trajectory ahead of me.
A big one, but I have no doubt that you'll be able to do it. One of the things that you've managed to do through all of this is just quite interesting, and I think is probably what's going to carry you through, is not only do you do these wonderful CEO jobs, which are, for charities, but you've also managed to build your own personal profile. And you're very good at doing that. You speak continuously. You're always on the speaking trail. Now, how have you managed to do that, and what on earth do you talk about?
Great question. I built my own profile because someone very early on, when I first had my first CEO role, when I was representing Dr. Catherine Hamlin, said to me, and this sounds really brutal, but she said to me, you need to run this charity like Catherine is already dead. So she's 91 now and still going strong. But I couldn't keep dragging her out to Australia for keynote speaking and attending events. So I had to turn myself into someone who was worth asking to keynote speech, to do interviews for the radio, to profile in business magazines. And I had to make myself available to do that, and a profile, worth asking. So, look, to be honest, the pink hair was a bit of a branding step.
And it's done you. It suits you, which is the other thing. You look cute.
Well,
so it's like a cute look.
And I should mention my hair is sponsored by the Blow Dry Bar. Find a blow dry bar in your city. I go to the blow dry bar at Potts Point, and I call Travis is my hairdresser, and I call him my brand manager.
Oh, that's too funny.
But the hair was actually just because I was invited to a red carpet event with Angelina Jolie, and so were several hundred other people.
How are you going to stand out?
I thought I need to stand out at this gig, and so I just handed myself over to the team at the blow dry bar and just said, have your way with me, and that's what they did, and I've stuck with it, and I've loved it, and it's been fun. But it has been I sort of stumbled into this little sort of branding exercise that worked quite well. But I'm also good on social media, and I learned early on that if you're going to build a social media community, you need to serve that community. So it's not all about banging on about what you do and where you connect, see me, speak. It's actually feeding that community with really good information about how to wrangle social media. And I've learnt a lot about things like search engine optimization, and I write a blog about communication tips and that sort of thing. So I'm really happy to share all that knowledge. I totally believe in abundance. I would never keep those skills and tricks to myself. I share all the cool online utilities that I discover.
It's the right way to go. You've got to share. You've got to be out there giving. Because when you give, you just get. And we don't give to get, but it just happens that way.
That's right. That's exactly right. I think generosity is, I always call generosity is boomerang. You throw that shit out there, it'll come right back to you. So, and that community has been awesome. Just recently, I'm writing a book called Extraordinary, How Ordinary People Change the World, and it comes out next year with HarperCollins. And I just put a question out to my community: what is the bravest thing you've ever done? What is the craziest, most full-on frightening thing you've ever pushed yourself to do? And the answers just blew me away and provided the framework for my chapter on courage. So I really do believe in giving to your community, but the community always gives back. It's wonderful.
Absolutely. Well, we've come to the end of the interview.
Sadly,
I know 30 minutes goes so fast. I just want to say thank you so much for being so courageous and for doing the incredible things that you do. And it's been such a privilege to interview you, and I look forward to watching how you grow and change, and maybe
Natasha.
Orange hair soon. You're listening to 89.7 FM Eastside Radio. This is Natasha and The Dialogue. We've been interviewing Lucy Perry, CEO of Sunrise Cambodia, speaker, communicator. We'll be back in 2 weeks, and I hope that you have an amazing evening.